All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good late night, wherever you're dialing in from. Great to have you here for our. This is our fifth session from the current ABCs of Wealth series. Glad to have you here. Uh, just wanted to share some information, some news. It's not necessarily. I think everyone knows that COVID's still happening. We've had Ismail from South Africa, from Saudi Arabia, which everyone is familiar with. His brother-in-law, his wife's brother, passed away a couple of days ago, so he won't be joining us. Um, Yesterday, I just learned that Hania and her family from Iran, they were missing because they had all, even though that they had received vaccination, they were dealing with COVID in Iran. So, but glad to hear that they're all okay. So this COVID is not going anywhere anytime soon, unfortunately, from what it looks like. But we'll continue on going. We'll start with a short prayer again for today, and then we'll proceed from there. My screen with sound.
Oh God, refresh and gladden my spirit, purify my heart, illumine my power. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Thou art my guide and my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. Oh God, I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will any trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. Oh God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, oh Lord.
All right. Just a quick review of what we did last week, and then we'll get started with this week. Uh, Last week we talked about being respectful and being thankful to many of our resources, to our society, to our friends, to our family, um, everything that we need to be, and how our society has become unthankful and not respectful to many things. We talked about how that is affecting our finances. Uh, Even if you're not paying for things, you're just grabbing stuff, you're grabbing plastic utensils, cutleries, and just whether we use them or not, we throw them away. Everything has become pretty much single use. We have gotten so used to it, and we just cannot continue like this. We have to not only be very mindful of our money, but also our environment, our surrounding, everything. So just becoming aware and not being too, especially with our, I think, young ones, They're becoming so drawn into social media that that's all they're seeing. They're seeing glorious stuff on social media. They see people just throwing and wasting stuff. And that is unfortunately becoming a role model. We don't see enough, or it's not being advertised enough that we need to live a different life. But hopefully, little by little, we can change that. I just wanted to share something that I forgot last week. So if you remember, we talked about not using plastic bags when we go to supermarket. What we forgot to do is to also talk about the thinner plastic bags that we often use to put fruits in it, put vegetables in it. Whenever I go to supermarket, it just breaks my heart. That's why every time we go there, we have to grab a new one, just put fruits in it, bring it home, and then throw it in the trash. We have been recycling even the thin plastic bags, and I think that's very common in a lot of countries. It's not just so not only using reusable instead of this, but also reusing this stuff. The other word that I wanted to mention about the same thing in that same line is the word refuse. We talked a little bit about it. There is so much that we can refuse and not just take. Again, we are offered a lot of stuff. Especially when we're outside the home. When we go to restaurants, they offer us a lot of napkins or straws. Now, some societies are beginning to ban. I know in Los Angeles, they just actually passed a law that when people are going to restaurants to pick up food to go, the restaurant has to ask them if they want napkins and if they want plastic cutleries. So definitely we are moving in the right direction, but also individually we have a lot of responsibility in there as well. All right, so let's get started with our lesson today. Miss Jade is here again with us. She's going to be presenting both hours, and I'll be co-facilitating with her. I'm going to make her a co-host so she pops up on top. And today we are talking about, we're starting with generosity and then getting into retirement and being selfless to ourselves. Jade, it's yours.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I have seen some familiar faces, but for those that I have not met yet, my name is Jade, and I'm on the Mind Treasures team. As Alex said, we're going to be talking about selflessness and generosity today. So, Alex, do you want to go ahead and pull it up? Or I'm having some connectivity issues on my end. I don't know if you've seen me pop in and out. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I will be able to get through without any issues.
No problem. If you have any problems, I'll just continue. So no worries.
Okay. So just going ahead and starting with the word generosity, right? In the chat, go ahead and tell me, what does generosity mean to you? Or what is an example of generosity? I will say on the screen, you should see that we have a brief definition, and I'll go ahead and start reading that off, but I wanted to try and open it up a little bit first so I can see what people's thoughts are on the word generosity before we take a deep dive into talking about some of the things that have to do with generosity and what does it have to do with money and how does it relate to finances. So on the screen, you'll see generosity is giving and sharing. You share freely, not with the idea of receiving something in return. You find ways to give others happiness, and you give simply because it is a joy to give to others. Generosity is one of the best ways to show love and friendship to everyone you know. And so I don't see anyone that has contributed in the chat in terms of what generosity means to you, or maybe some examples. Oh, we just had one come in. Rhonda says, to me, it means giving something of yourself and or your resources. Very good, Rhonda. So I think what she's also explaining is that it doesn't just have to do with money, right? We can be generous with things outside of money. And I think people oftentimes will think, oh, to be generous, I have to give money. But you could be a generous person and not have to give of money. It can include money, but there's other things that we can be generous with. There's in the chat, what are some other things besides money that we might be able to be generous with? And I see Raju says giving, sharing, and receiving. Okay, so that's kind of a compound sort of understanding, right? So to give, to share, and then also to receive. So I'm going to challenge Raju's thinking in when we give because we are being generous, do we expect something in return? Do we give to expect something in return, or do we give just for the sake of giving? I think you're muted. There you go.
Roger, you're muted.
Yeah, we can hear you. He's giving a very detailed explanation, but we can't hear him.
There you go. You're good.
Okay, giving not necessary all the time we are expecting something, but it can be depend on the situation. But generally, giving in to humankind, it is giving within our capacity that we are not necessary. We need to be expect from something from that. But generosity also means we must have the heart to receive something from anybody who can give any form of gift.
Okay, so that's an interesting concept, right? Because I think you talk about the actual act of yourself giving, but you're saying generosity to you also includes being able to receive someone who might be being generous to you as a recipient, right? So if you aren't able to receive something that someone is giving to you, then you might not be seen as being generous. Is that what I'm understanding, Raju?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I think that's great because that's an interesting concept that I don't think most people often think of because it is also the act of receiving. People often think of their act of giving having to do with generosity, but some people have a hard time receiving someone who might be giving them something. So that's an interesting concept to raise. So thank you for sharing that. Rhonda says time. Time is something that you can be generous with, right? We can give of our time. We can donate our time. We can go and spend time helping someone. Oftentimes people always say, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Time is always something that people don't feel that they have enough of, right? But you can set aside time to give to someone to help them or to do something with them that they might enjoy, to put a smile on their face. Eva has shared with us our resources like our money and possessions. Okay, so those are examples of other things besides money that we are able to share, other resources besides money. Maybe we might give toys or we might give clothes that we're no longer wearing, things that we're not using, we can donate. Juliet says it can be sharing with others whatever you have, such as money, ideas, or your time and talents. So Juliet brings up some interesting ideas too, right? We can also share talents that we have or ideas that we might have with people. Those are all assets that we have that we can be generous with. So you guys are raising lots of great different ideas. Kali says our energy and time as well, but without expecting anything in return. That's the key point, right? When we give, but we have the expectation that we're going to get something back in return, or we do something because of the benefit that it's going to give to us, that's not being generous, right? When we are being generous, we give solely because we want to give to that person, whether it be money or time or our talents or skills. We are giving to that person solely to benefit them. Hassan says praying for someone. Praying for someone can be an act of generosity as well. You are caring for that person, and so you're sharing not only your time and your thoughts and your prayers with them. All right, so lots of great examples. Thank you guys for sharing. When we teach this lesson in the classes and with students, we do an activity where it's called bridge crossing. You'll see that on the screen. And during that activity, the students get broken up into two teams and each are on one side of a bridge. And we tell them that water is underneath that bridge, and in that water are sharks. And so the goal of the game is to get all of their teammates from one side of the bridge to the other side of the bridge without losing any teammates, right? And if somebody, it's all made up, right? So we use a line on asphalt that is drawn on a playground. And so the line represents the bridge. So if they step off of that line, then they have fallen off of the bridge into the water that's full of sharks, and the sharks are going to eat them, right? So they oftentimes struggle through that. It's an exercise of teamwork and communication, but they realize that oftentimes one team member will get across and they'll be like, oh, we won. It's over, right? But it's just themselves. They've only gotten one person across, right? And so they have to realize how to be selfless in that it's not just about themselves, it's about their entire team. And they have to figure out a way of how they're going to work together to get as many of their teammates across that bridge, and be generous with, maybe they might not be the first person, right? Maybe their talents that they can give to their team might be of different strategies on how to communicate, right? And how do they work together to be able to achieve the goal of the entire team, not just one or two people getting across. And so the kids usually have a good time with that activity, but it also is teaching them, right, not to just think of themselves, and how to go outside of thinking only about themselves and working together as a team. And so that kind of leads us into the other activities that we do when we teach this lesson. And we start having discussions about what are some of the things that we do to bring joy to other people, right? So when we can give of our money, give of our time, those are some things. I often share that I like to cook, right? But cooking doesn't just bring joy to me. Other people have said that when I cook, it also brings joy to them. They think that I am a good cook, and so they enjoy the food and it makes them happy. I know I like when I eat good food, so I can relate in that. I'm not too happy if I eat food that's not good. So in the chat, go ahead and share. Let's kind of open it up for discussion a little bit. What are some of the things that you do that can bring joy and happiness to others, right? I gave you an example of myself of cooking for others and people finding joy and happiness in that. I see Alex has already written in there, talent, time, energy, skills, and prayers. Well, that was based off of just some of the things that we can do and share with others to be generous. But I want you to kind of think of right now, what are some things that you yourself can do to bring joy to other people, right?
Jade, while we're waiting for responses, I'm not sure if you know this, but Raju was smiling when you were describing the bridge crossing activity. And the reason he's smiling, I don't know if you saw this or not, he sent me a very cute animation video, which is exactly what we do with the kids. I'm going to share it in the WhatsApp group. But it's like, so that, yeah, it's even better than it's a couple of animals, but it's exactly what we've been doing in the classes. So I will share that. That's why he was smiling when you were describing that activity.
I thought he just was excited and he might have wanted to play that game.
No,
it is a fun game though. I always enjoy it when we do it with the kids.
Yeah. And while we're doing that, I want to go back to the quote that's on the top of the lesson. It says, if man be imbued with all good qualities but be selfish, all other virtues will fade or pass, and eventually he will grow worse. That's another one that we're talking as part of our lesson, is that we can have a lot of good quality, good character traits, which we've talked about. But often we've seen that people do have a lot of characters, but then they keep everything to themselves. It's just all about them. So generosity is one of the main character traits. And I think during the pandemic, we even saw the need for being generous even more and more. And the internet has allowed us to be more generous, especially with our time and with our knowledge, because now we can have a larger reach across the globe. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. So Juliet has shared with us visiting someone who is sick, either at home or in the hospital. That's a great example. right? Oftentimes we don't realize, I was kind of sharing with us, a lot of times we will get so wrapped up in our daily lives that time is always scarce, right? We always wish we could have more time to get the things done that we want to get done and to enjoy our time with our loved ones, right? But oftentimes we could get so wrapped up in our daily day-to-day that we can lose sight of just a simple hour, right, of going to visit someone who might not be feeling well, whether they're at home or in the hospital, and just spending quality time with that person could really put a smile on their face, could totally change their entire mood. And they often say that, you know, being sick, a lot of times there's like a very high percentage that's related to healthiness and physical ailments, right? And so when you are trying to fight something and your body is physically trying to fight something, there is a mental and emotional component to being able to do that. And so if you could really just take that quality time and spend with that person and change their mood, it actually might end up having a huge effect that you might not even realize, because you're like, well, I'm not a doctor. I just am coming to spend time, but it can affect that person and their health and well-being. So that is a really great one. Thanks for sharing that, Juliet. Raju says caring about people's health, right? And that could definitely, you could see that in a lot of different ways, right? You could not just by spending time with them or cooking for them, right? You might be trying to get them to be more active, right? A lot of times, especially in our society today, so much things are happening where it's happening on a screen, right? We're either looking at a computer screen, a TV screen, and we're not having as much interaction. And a lot of times that's also being passed down to the kids. The younger generation, they're not playing outside. They're not as active as they used to be, right? Or when we were growing up, you know, I know I used to be outside playing all the time, right? And we wouldn't come home until the sign to come home is when the street lights come on, right? If you weren't in by the street lights come on, then that was like the sign for dinner. But we didn't want to be inside, right? We wanted to be outside running around. And so our society and our world has definitely changed a lot, but we can try and get people to be more active because that's going to cause them to be more healthy, right? And so that's going off of Raju's point about caring about people's health. That can take a variety of different ways that you could do that. Eva says, influence others positively, positive videos, positive phrases. Yeah, I often call that speaking life into people, right? So you always want to try and share things that are positive with someone. We are human beings. We all don't always feel positive all the time, but if we try and share some of those, it can not only affect other people, but it could also affect us as well. So that's great. So let's move on to the second question that we usually open up and say, what are some locations or organizations where I can help others? Right. So now we talked about things that we can do to bring joy to others, but where might we go to be able to help these people? Some locations, so I gave the example of cooking for people, right? And there's a lot of times there's these buildings that are used as, sometimes they're permanent, but sometimes they're leased and used as soup kitchens. And what a soup kitchen is it creates a space where people can come who don't have access to food to get a hot meal, whether they might be a homeless person or someone who might not necessarily have the funds to be able to cook a hot meal for themselves or for their family. They can go to these soup kitchens and they can get a hot meal. So a soup kitchen is a place where I could go and cook to bring joy to other people, to help those who don't have access to food, and be able to bring a smile to their face. Rhonda has shared a church. A church is a place where you can go to help others. Food banks is another place where you can go to help others, and hospitals is another place where you can go to help others. Eva has shared religious places, so churches and temples, and NGOs, so non-governmental organizations, oftentimes what might look like, but what might be called a nonprofit, that's doing good in the world, right? And so those organizations oftentimes are ran really small, right? They have not a lot of staff. And so they can use a lot of volunteers a lot. They rely a lot on volunteers to help be able to create, to be able to help others. Juliet says prisons, orphanages, nursing homes, all great places where you can go to help others. And Raju says charity organizations. So you guys got it. You guys know all there. I mean, this is by no means the only places that you can go. There's lots of places where people need help, right? And so if you just think about your community and you don't necessarily have to go far, right? Just think about within 5-10 mile radius of where you live, all of the different places where you can go to help others. And when we do this with kids often think of very first, homeless shelters, hospitals, and they bring up parks too. But they don't really think about some of the places that you guys named, right? It's not very often that they might name an orphanage, because oftentimes it's students that we teach in the schools, that's not part of their community. And so they don't have awareness of it, but you guys are bringing up lots of great places. Me too, also shared juvenile homes. Very good. So places where we can go, all great places where we can go to help others.
Jay, can I add something in here?
Sure.
So a couple of things in here is that while everyone listed a lot of this stuff, which is great, and we should often we come up with ideas and think that we need to start something new, but then if we really think about it, there might be other organizations or places that are already doing something that we can just join them. Now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't start something new, because we did. My wife and I started Mind Treasures because nothing like this existed. But one thing we learned was we tried to invite people for initially it was after our programs. It was okay. We tried to create summer camps or other programs where parents will bring in their children or adults sign up for the program, but we really quickly realized that model does not work. So we found our niche in going to schools, and that's something that I'm going to add in here. I think schools is one of the greatest places that we can be a service to society, to humanity. And believe it or not, even here in our town, in US, there are, I think I shared this, there are many students that are completing grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, and still they cannot spell their own name or have correct spellings of things. And these are things that, and I'm sure this is all around the world, it's not just here. So going to schools has been an eye-opener for me. I don't know about you, Jade, if you had done work in schools before Mind Treasures, but since we started Mind Treasures, it's like, wow, there's so much need. And often, to be honest, I have thought about, do we need to teach them finances, or first do we need to go teach them how to read and write and do math? That's been a big question in my mind.
Yeah, the education system is definitely a place that has changed a lot over the years, and I can't honestly say that it is for the better. You find a lot of students that aren't getting their needs met in the school system, and it's due a lot to large class sizes here locally where we live here in San Diego, but this is a universal problem. I mean, you have a large class of students and one teacher, right? And that teacher is responsible to teach everyone, but everyone doesn't learn the same. And so you have a lot of times students that are in a classroom that are not getting their education because maybe they're not learning the way that teacher is teaching. And so it is a huge problem in schools, and there's a lot of different ways that can be addressed. But I've been in education prior to Mind Treasures too, and I even did like one-on-one working with students, and it's because there's so much that's not being taught. I mean, Alex is talking about 3rd and 4th and 5th graders not being able to spell their name or be able to read or write, and they just keep getting passed on and passed on and passed on, and so then they become adults, and they really don't have a strong foundation that they should have to function in the world. And so it's hard because oftentimes to teach our program, you really need to have some math basics to understand addition, subtraction, and things. And you end up sometimes doing like a crash course in math, but because of our limited time frame and our partnerships with the schools and not really wanting to kind of step on the toes of the teacher because it is their classroom, but the student just might not be able to understand as much because of they're lacking some huge foundational holes in their learning. But yeah, not to go too much off of on a tangent, but yeah, there's lots of places that you can go to help others, and there are lots of places that already exist, right? So I oftentimes, when we talk about this, say, don't always think that you need to create something. There's lots of places, and I think that the world would actually function a lot better if people realize kind of the overlap and the synergies that exist in places, because you could be way more impactful working together and collaborating together than kind of individual organizations working as silos. And a lot of times we have organizations in the same space doing very similar things that if they joined and teamed together, they could have so much greater of a reach and an impact than they are able to, limited with their own resources. Raju says, not only give fish, but teach them skills to catch fish themselves. Yeah, right. So not just teaching them, but really developing skill sets for them, I think is really what Raju is focusing on. All right. So, and then the last question that we always raise is, what can I do to bring joy and happiness to myself now or in the future? And I raised this question at thinking through after we've talked about bringing joy to other people, right? And places where we can go to bring joy, because oftentimes we don't necessarily think about ourselves, right? And so I usually ask, is it easier to bring joy and happiness to others when we are joyful and happy ourselves, or is it harder, right? If we're not in a good mood, are we going to be able to bring joy and happiness to others? Yes, possibly, but it might be harder, right? It's a lot easier to bring joy and happiness and to be able to help someone else when we take care of ourselves. It's the whole concept of, when you're on an airplane, they say, put your mask on first before you try and assist someone else, right? So we need to make sure that we ourselves are taken care of and that we're bringing joy and happiness to ourselves before we try and bring joy and happiness to others. Because oftentimes, if we're in a bad mood, you can end up passing that bad mood off to somebody else, and that we don't want to do. Eva says, receive happily from others, stay positive, and read more. So those are, I think, some of examples, Eva, that you might do to bring joy and happiness to yourself. Is that correct? Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So in the chat, go ahead and put, what are some things that you do to bring joy and happiness to yourself? And I'll give you an example. I like to swim. Swimming is one of the things that, or just being around water. Like, I don't know what it is about water, but anytime I see water, it's like I could be having a bad day and a bad mood, and it immediately changes my mood and my feeling. And when I swim, I get really happy. And so I know that there's studies that show, health benefits to swimming and health benefits to being in the water. And there's emotional benefits too, right? So mental, physical, emotional, all I think are related. And let's see, Khalees says to acquire a skill for myself. So that learning about something new or developing a skill brings Khalees joy. Great. Okay. Any other examples of things that you might do? Alex, what do you do to bring yourself joy? I actually don't know, so I'm curious to know.
I used to play music. That was music, carpentry, which I think that's what led to doing our treasure boxes. Those were my hobbies and stuff, and reading too. Unfortunately, right now these days, really my joy and happiness is waking up every morning, seeing what messages I have from what part of the world, and then also going to bed. Those are really, I know it's kind of weird, but those are my joy and happiness these days. It's really all the energy we're getting from everyone who's on this call, the entire network of mind treasures. So I think I've been able to be able to combine work and happiness at the same time. You know, that we don't do this work because of money. We do it because, and the changes that we see in people, that really bring joy and happiness to me. So that's my fix. Are we ready for a breakout?
Yeah, I think so. I just want to mention Mithu said to meditate, and Rhonda said spending time with family and friends and allowing for some me time. Very, very important, right? To disconnect and just kind of spend some time with yourself. Those are great examples. So thank you for sharing that. So in the breakout rooms, Alex, did you already split everyone up?
Yep, I'm ready to go. So let's do breakout. We'll take like 5-7 minutes, and then we'll come back. So open up the breakout. Okay, let's go to our breakout room. Just give me 1 second, please. I have somebody who is out there. Poor Hassan is not having his connection is. Okay. Is everybody coming? All right, that's fine. So we got a couple of questions for this breakout session. All right, so the first question we have is, do you think generosity is an individual responsibility? Why or why not? If anybody would like to, Eva, what's your thought? Generosity, is it an individual responsibility or is it a community or both?
I think is individual capability. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, I do think that every one of us can do that.
Okay. All right. Any thoughts from others that are on the call? Is generosity, and then we can add on some more. So Eva, can you elaborate on that? Why do you think, let me also say this, does generosity start from a young age, or do we become generous when we have, especially when it comes with money, do we become generous when we have lots of money? You're muted. Eva, you're muted.
Okay, I believe that it's an individual effort before we roll it out to the public, right? So it's like if we can't actually donate money on our own, then if you're talking about groups, it will be harder. That's just my thinking. I'm not too sure.
I don't think there's any wrong or right. So anybody else who would like to contribute to this? This is a small breakout group, so just unmute yourself and talk. I think that it's every individual's responsibility, and it's something that we need to teach our children from a very young age, because we teach our children a lot of stuff. We teach them how to brush their teeth, how to say prayers, those that they have a spiritual background. So being generous is also, I know that the sharing with the children sometimes doesn't go well, especially like if you ask them to share their toy, it's like, oh, this is mine, I don't want to share. And some people believe that, well, we shouldn't brainwash our children, but we brainwash our children with a lot of other stuff. Again, cleaning, keeping themselves clean, brushing teeth. So I think generosity starts from individuals at a young age. That's
Yeah, I spoke to some kids last week, I think last week or last 10 days ago, and I'm teaching them how they can allocate their money, right? And one of the kids told me that, oh, when I receive money, I can save more by not sharing with others, because one of the jar is to share, right? Then I was like a bit shocked, and I was like, who actually teaches this kid not to share? If everyone think that way, it will be hard for the society. Yeah, that's why if it's an individual responsibility, then everyone will benefit as well.
Mm-hmm. And something that we see in class is that, because we do encourage, we have like, you have the jars, we have the treasure box that has the share part of it. often in class, there are many students that don't want to share, and we'd never force them. It's like this is not a forced thing. Sharing and investing, those two are not forced. But throughout the program, we try to bring so many examples by the videos that we watch, by the different things, of bringing up the needs of our society, whether it's somewhere where we live or other parts of the world. And usually, eventually, they do get into the mood. Oh, maybe I do need to share. Maybe I need to be generous. Kilias, Hania, if you guys want to add anything to the conversation. You guys are awfully quiet. All right. Or you can even put it in the chat.
I have another idea about generosity, but I always believe that money needs to be flown. Like there should be money coming in and money going out. If you are not generous enough to let the money flow out to others, including like donating to others, giving salary to others, right, buying things from others, or even investing is also money out, right? So we are not able to receive money from others as well. So it works both ways.
Yep.
That's what I can add.
Yep, definitely. Thank you. Kilias, I think you go ahead.
Yes, Alex, that's very true. If you look at generosity, it's supposed to be an individual's responsibility because it should come from one's feeling. And as we do that, we'll be able to attract the positive energies that will enable us also to acquire a lot of wealth and other gifts.
Okay. All right. Very cool. All right. So the next question is, which will lead us into retirement, is how can you be generous in your retirement years? What are things that we can definitely, and why is it important to be even maybe more generous in our retirement years?
Yeah, I think that corresponds to my previous comments, right? If we are not generous enough, we won't be actually saving money and investing, because investing is also allowing the money to go out to somebody else to manage the thing for you. It could be for properties, even like mutual funds, stocks. You are giving out your money to other corporations to help you to earn more money. If you are not generous enough to let the money flow out, I don't think our retirement, it won't have enough passive income to come in for us as well.
Okay. Yep. Very good. Yep. Other thoughts from anyone else? And go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll stop. But yeah, retirement, as we will see in the next hour, it's like this is why we have put generosity, selflessness along with retirement investing, because our future, our older ages is going to come, whether we like it or not. It's going to come, and we're going to get to a point where we cannot physically continue to do things to have active income. So that's definitely how we're doing in time. We got still a couple of minutes. And then the last question I have, we've all been given resources of time, money. How would you like to grow in being generous to others? I think we've talked about all of this stuff. So we've talked extensively. Anything else that we can think about, especially in teaching? I'm trying to think other methods that we have used to encourage the young ones to be generous. And often, I think just one last thing is that often when we talk about generosity, we're just thinking of money, and people say, oh, I don't have any. It's like, well, money is not the only thing. There's so many resources, as we were talking about. There's so many resources that we can share with everyone. So let's just not. It's kind of a sad story. I think it was the very first children program that we did 16 years ago. There was a 5th grade student who he said, I will share lots of money when I have it. And unfortunately, he died in a motorcycle accident, and motorcycle racing. He was really heavy into racing motorcycle. And it's a very sad story. And his family still lives in our neighborhood. And it's like, I wish he would have started sharing before, because we never know when our last day on earth is. So let's not waste any time and really be generous. All right, let's go back to the main hall before this thing kicks us out.
We weren't quite finished, Alex.
Oh, I'm sorry. Our group was quiet, and it's like, okay, let's go back to the sorry about that.
Well, it's okay. We were just we had just started to dive deep into the first question.
Oh, okay. So go ahead and share what you guys have.
So the first question well, first we went around and we introduced each other, ourselves, and got to know a little bit about where everyone was from. And then the first question that I raised was, do you think generosity is an individual responsibility? Why or why not? And Rhonda had opened us off and said that she felt like it was an individual responsibility, but that it wasn't solely an individual responsibility. And it has a lot to do with your own self-identity in terms of like, are you a giver or a taker? And I kind of chimed in after her and said, I definitely agree. I don't think that it's mutually exclusive. I don't think it is just your own responsibility. I think that there is a societal component to it. And I definitely think people are affected by how society progresses in terms of the mentality that's developed. I think that we learn a lot from our environment. It contributes to the type of individuals that we are. And that I think that it's hard to kind of unlearn some things that we get from society. And so I think that that's a challenge that we as individuals have. But I don't think that being generous is only an individual thing, or do I think that it's only a societal or universal thing? I think it's both.
All right. We talked just about the same thing too, that it's an individual responsibility, and particularly the need to start from young ages. Just like we teach our children to pray, for those that have a spiritual background, to pray, to brush their teeth, to keep themselves clean, take shower, do all kinds of stuff. And often they don't know why. We don't tell I don't know, whenever we get our first tooth, why we don't explain to the little child why does he or she needs to brush, but we just get them to develop that habit. Generosity is the same thing. What we talked about is that it needs to start from a young age. First, it's a habit, and then as they grow older, they understand why. Then we describe to them and give them different options of, well, these are the different places where we can be generous. Another thought was that particularly money is something that it needs to be always flowing through. We can't just keep on the money, just keep on saving money in the bank account and don't do anything with it. So some of it is for our expenses, for things that we like to have, for investment, and then we definitely need to allocate some for sharing as well. So that's what we talked about. I share that it's kind of a sad story, but the very first children program that we did in 2007, it was a group of 6th graders. There were 8 of them, and there was a young boy who didn't want to share anything at all. And when we asked, he said, I will share when I have lots of money. And unfortunately, he died in a motorcycle accident a few years later. The family lives in our neighborhood, and it's like, I wish he would have shared something before even passing on. So we just never know when our last day on earth is. So I think I kind of like to look at it as like, I need to be generous as much as I can, because I never know how long I'm going to be here. The other thing, Jade, what have you seen from when we teach this lesson, or just overall? Because in our register book, we have the save, invest, share, and spend. So for students, spending is definitely easy. Saving, okay, yeah, saving for something. Investing, they do understand that it's for college or when they grow up and have a car. What's been your experience in the classrooms with the concept of sharing with students? Is it received well? Do we need to work on it?
So I will say, generally speaking, most students do not share. They save and they spend. Well, we have the requirement that they have to put they have to allocate money in the spend category to take care of their life necessities. So food, water, clothing, shelter, things that they need to survive. And half of the allowance that we give them goes into that category. And then they have their other half of the allowance that they can divide if they want to put more into spend for the life necessities, or they want to share, invest, or save for something that they actually want. Those are their own decisions that they make with their money. But oftentimes most students don't put a lot of money into share. They will put it into the other categories. But then you also have some students that they put all of their money outside of what's required for them in the spend category and share. All right. And so those students, you know, that something is happening in terms of their life and their environment that they're in, that they are seeing that that's what they want. That's what they're choosing to do. They want to give, right? And that's becoming a part of who they are. And so I do think that it is representative of things that they are seeing in their community, in their environment at home and where they live. That is relating to also what we're teaching in our program. And so I think most students, when they first start, they might not share at all, but by the end, they start to see that it's not going to hurt to just give some, that they have enough and that they can share and still have what they need to have to take care of their wants and needs. So.
Okay. I'm going to show you guys a couple of things, couple of resources that are particularly in our workbook, because we are talking about sharing, and sharing not being just the monetary aspects of life. And this is going to be one of your assignments in the online worksheet. It's better done in classroom. It's not as easy to do here, but part of it you can do in the online worksheet. So our concept, and we will see it a little bit more tomorrow, next week, our concept of wealth, and that's something that we're trying to change. When you look at the dictionary's definition of wealth, it says abundance of material stuff, houses, homes, jewelry, cars, and things like that. If you look at the definition of rich and wealthy, it says a person that has a lot of this stuff. But we're really trying to change all those conceptions that wealth, first of all, is not just about material stuff. We have wealth of knowledge, talent, skills, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual powers. These are all the different types of wealth that we have, that we need to just recognize. We have them, but we need to recognize them. So in class, this is one activity that we have hardly ever done in classrooms because we just don't have enough time. But it is something that we are always encouraging those who want to do the program, is to have the participants list out their knowledge and all these different types of wealth. And then the idea is that every time when we do one of the lesson plans, in addition to giving them paying money as allowance to put in the treasure box, they can also cut out one of these squares and put it in their share and in their invest. Because all of these are things, resources that we can share and invest. We can share or invest an hour of our time. If someone is good at, I don't know, reading history, has a history knowledge of history, they can share it with other people. So as you can see, these are things that's one activity I wish we had more time to do in the classrooms, but if there are teachers who can do this, that would be something great as well. So that's on that one that we do in this lesson. Oh, the other thing that we do as part of this lesson, which we've been encouraging everyone to do, is sharing our knowledge, what we're learning in this series, with everyone else who's not part of this program, with our friends, family, children, grandchildren. So when we do this as groups, larger groups, particularly like when we're in schools, every classroom, we do an election process, because the 12th session of our series in the schools is a assembly, or is a presentation by each classroom. So each classroom, we ask them to elect 2 representatives that would like to present a brief overview of what they learned over the last 3 months, because our programs in the schools are done in 3 months. And we do the election process a little different than any other ones. So our election process is based on, we ask the students to elect 2 representatives based on the qualities that they think a representative should have, not what they promise. This is something that we see in our societies, and I think it's very common in most countries, that those who want to be elected, they nominate themselves, they do propaganda, they make a lot of promises of once I become the president or the representative or congressman, congresswoman, or whatever, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and all of that. And with all the best intention they have, things just doesn't work that way. So in classroom, we ask the students, it's like, what qualities? And then we talk about they need to be confident, they need to have a loud, not yelling voice. They need to have courage because it's not easy to get in front of people. So that's what this activity is. And it's quite, kids love it. They get to see how we do this election process. Jade, anything to add on this last 2, whether the resources or this election before we move on?
Yeah, the election part, I often will tie back into the very beginning lesson where we go through all the human virtues and the character traits. And in our curriculum, there is not a completely exhaustive list, but there is a list in there that a lot of times in the very beginning, students might not know what some of those words mean, but over the course of, by the time we get to this lesson, they've learned. And they start to identify, I want my representative to have this quality that I've learned about. I want my representative to have this quality. And we do allow them to, if they feel that they represent the qualities that they've identified that they want in their class representative, they can vote for themselves. And oftentimes the kids love it, right? They love to be able to participate in a voting process and to be able to represent their class. And so I think it is a great opportunity for students to be able to kind of take on a leadership position. And when they do, I call it a graduation ceremony, where at the end that we have in the classrooms, it's not just about what they learned, right? So they have, being elected as a representative, they have to figure out, okay, I'm representing my entire class. So I need to talk to some of the other students and figure out, what did they learn from this program? Collectively, what did our classroom learn from this program? Because they all are, as we were talking about earlier, all the students are different, right? They learn differently. And so what one might have taken and has resonated with that student might be different than what another has done. And so these representatives, they get to see and put together what their entire class has learned from the program. So it's really awesome to see that.
Very cool. And what I wanted to show you, if you haven't seen it on our website, if you go to our website, all the way at the bottom on the home page, it does say student presentation. And these are recorded. We always record all the little short. They're usually about 3-4 minutes of student presentations. We probably have to go down to the last one that we recorded was in 2019. But if we do go there, they are so powerful. And these are like, this is what I say when I'm not going to play any of them, but these are like so powerful. This is a 3rd grader. And once you hear her speech, it's like, wow, this is what, this is how I bring joy and happiness to myself. So if you haven't watched it, go to our website. It's on the homepage, and then it goes into our, if you have been to our YouTube channel, that's where you can see this presentation from the students. And sometimes there are even principals that have made comments too. Really encourage everyone to do it. All right. So why don't we go right on time? Why don't we go to our next session? Jay, before I hand it up to you, I want to start, go back to our patience tab. So this hour, we're going to be talking about retirement, being selfless to ourselves in the future, retirement and investing. And I want to go back to this. If you remember this table that we had, just kind of, this is like our life journey. Remember, we started with the mother's womb, how we prepared for this world. We've gone through our childhood. Our parents provided for us while we gained education, experience. And toward our later parts of our teenage year, we began to earn some money. In our adulthood years, our concentration is to make money, to have an earning so we can support ourselves, we can support our families. And usually we start from active income, and our goal is to move on to passive income. And during that time, obviously, we continue to continue increasing our education and experience. And this is in preparation for the later years, whatever we want to call it. These days, I think the word retirement has become a little taboo. Well, we don't want to call it retirement. It's like, okay, whatever we want to call it. It's just going to come for most of us. We're going to get to a point where we physically cannot work. We cannot have active income, but we need to rely on passive income. And we want to not only enjoy a worry-free life, we also want to make sure that we continue to work on the legacy that we are leaving behind. So I hope that you can see the program. Our program is going through all of this stuff. It's not just about banking services. It's about all the different aspects in here. And just a couple of things for those that have spiritual backgrounds, again, from all the sacred writings that we read, we continue to prepare ourselves for the next world by doing these 7 steps. And then again, based on the writings of the Bible, Quran, Baha'i writings, Buddha's writings, there is life after here. And we will continue, our soul will continue to progress until we attain the presence of God. And one of the requirements based on one of the scriptures that we read was we need to leave something behind. We definitely need to leave a legacy behind. So with that, Jade, it's yours. Where would you like to start? I have pulled up the from the advanced level. Where do you want to go?
Yeah, in the printed workbook under the advanced level, let's start with the selflessness retirement. Okay. And while he's pulling that up, I wanted to pose a question to everyone. Is based off of that layout of life that Alex just went through, when do people feel that now in today's society, when does retirement start? I know this is going to be, people have different thoughts on this in terms of when retirement starts and what that looks like in our world. It looks very different than what it used to. I mean, years and years ago, people would work at the same job, right? And that job, they would be there for 30, 40 years. They would have a pension set up and then they would retire, right? But our world today looks totally different. And so people often change jobs. There's a lot more fluidity within our labor force, and the younger generations, they are moving from job to job a lot more frequently, which used to be looked upon as not a favorable thing, right? It used to be like if you moved from one job to the next very quickly, it would be seen as unstable and that you couldn't hold a job. Whereas now it's not necessarily, depending on the industry, not looked upon as in that lens as much anymore. Because there's a lot more fluidity in the labor force and people are moving from job to job a lot more frequently than they did in the past. So in the chat, Alex has posed a question, when does retirement start in your country, right? What does that look like, and around what age does that look like for the community where you live? Khalees says in Zambia, it's between 60 and 65 years old. And I think a lot of times it also has to do with the life longevity of the community and the country where you live, right? So I think collectively as a world, we are living longer than we were before. A lot of that has to do with science development and health and people being able to live a lot longer, but there are still communities of the world that do not have a very long lifespan. And that also has to do with the environment that they live in and what is surrounding them. Juliet says also in Zambia, early retirement from formal employment at age 55, normal retirement at 60, but in my opinion, one does not retire at all. You keep working. And that's possibly true, right? I know there's a lot of times where people can retire, right? They do not need to actively have a job that's producing active income. they can, financially, they can retire, but they choose not to, right? And they want to still be involved, or they want to be able to fill their time with something that is at a job, and they feel like, well, if I retire and I no longer, well, what am I going to do with my time? And a lot of times people start to, as they approach retirement, they start to be like, okay, well, what is it? They've never been able to think with, okay, I'm going to have all this time. What am I going to do with it? Right. And so I think I've had conversations with those that are older than me as they approach those years, and they start to think, and I've always told them, I said, think of it as a blank canvas. What do you want to do? Fill the time up with whatever it is that you want to do, right? If you don't necessarily have to work, you can choose to work, but you also can give of your time. We were talking about generosity, and one of the things that we can choose to be generous with is our time, right? And so where are you going to choose to spend your time, and with who, and how is that going to look like? And I think a lot of times in our world, we've been working since such a young age that it kind of is like complex to be able to actually process and think through that. Eva says in Malaysia, retirement at age 55 for Malaysians. Mitu says in India, 58 to 65. And then Raju says in Malaysia, first we need to understand that retirement has 3 phases: go phase, slow go phase, and no go phase. I'm going to, maybe Raju, if you can explain what each of those phases are, that would be helpful.
Okay, yeah. Basically, retirement, when we talk about retirement, before a person retire, it is the retirement age is only a legal age. It's all depend one's biological age, how he want to take care of himself and how he build up himself. So based on that, a person when he retire, you must understand 3 phases, where go phase, where he's able to be very healthy, enough money, he can enjoy the life, he can share with more people. Slow go pace is his health is getting retorted and money is getting lower, but he's still able to do. And when everybody will reach a stage where they are dependent on others, that is no go pace. So people will go through. But when we talk about retirement, if we plan well, we can extend the period of go pace. So that should be our goal, to help people to understand this.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting because as you're talking, I'm actually going through a transition within my family. I have, I'm Creole, part Creole, and within the Creole family structure, it's someone that's like a grandfather, a great uncle, and a godfather mixed together. And in the language is called a paran. And he is 93 years old, and him and his wife, they're very independent. He drives still, but we know that within the phases, like you were just saying, Raju, even though at 93 years old, he still challenges me he's going to beat me running, and he's in great health, right? That there is going to be a transition into another phase of the later on years. And it's crazy to think at 93 that he hasn't hit that slow go or no go phase yet. But he will eventually get there. And so we are trying to make the transition easier than harder, right? So while he's very fully able and very independent, thinking, okay, forward thinking, it's going to be easier to be in a facility where there can be care. So then when he needs it, it's not, we're trying to move and fight and struggle at that point, because we think it's going to be much harder. But he's not having it and he doesn't think that it's needed at this point. So you are definitely right. There are things, there are definitely phases of retirement. And I definitely think that it has a lot to do with your upkeep of your own body, right? It also has a lot to do with where you live in your environment and the things that you're around. But there's a huge individual component to our own health, right? We are responsible for our own health. And then Zeus says in Canada, 65, retirement is at 65. So it seems like, collectively, 55 and above, there's some sort of form of retirement, looking at the different communities that we have here on the call. But what does that retirement phase look like, right? I know Raju just gave us great 3 phrases of the go-go phase, the slow-go phase, and the no-go phase. But what are you to be doing during that time? And what are we to be doing with our money, right? Are we supposed to be having the same sort of financial plan in terms of like the budget and expenses that we had talked about early on in our curriculum? Or do we make adjustments now that we've hit a life phase of retirement, right? Financially, are we able to worry less than we were when we were working, or is our financial plan not set up in a way where we are able to have financial freedom and not worry about things? Do we make adjustments to our lifestyle, right? Does that budget, do we start to cutting different aspects of the components of our budget and the way that we live, so that way our money can be stretched longer because we're not as actively working? And then also going along with that is the investment piece, right? Which we'll get into, and what that looks like in terms of where we're putting our money, so that way that our financial plan can allow us a lot more freedom. So
can I share something?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to put a disclaimer in here. Raju is one of the very few professional financial advisors that has attended our program. And I'm always very, very involving financial advisors, because they seem to be sometimes a little scary, especially when it comes to retirement planning. They meet with clients and they tell them that, oh, this is how much you're going to need for retirement. And people don't have it. And it's like, okay, I might just as well go forget about it. But no, Roger is great. This is great to have. And there was something else I was going to mention. Oh, and there's if you might have noticed, I'm not sure, Roger, if this is kind of opposite of what you normally work with your clients too. Most financial advisors, at least here in the US, their recommendation is for everyone to begin paying themselves first. And I'm going to go into our register book so I can show you. So if you have seen our register book in our treasure box is organized a little differently. So I think most financial advisors say before you spend all of your money, you need to have your saving, put some saving first. But then we've done it completely opposite. We're saying that first think about your life necessities. This is your most important thing. And as Jade was mentioning a couple minutes ago, it's like when we are in an airplane, when they're giving us instructions on how to use those masks, the air mask, it says, put it on yourself first and then your child. So first we need to think about what is our life necessities. That is what we need to concentrate. Of course, the latest cell phone is not a life necessity, even when we buy it on payment plans. Let's see, vacation, yes, it's good to have, but it's not necessarily a life necessity. So we really need to think about what do we consider as life necessity. And then along in the same line, that's why we put share first. So first we secure our personal basic needs. Then we really need to think about others, as we were talking about. And then lastly, it's like, let's indulge ourselves, something that we want to do in the future. So that's one of the major differences between our program and a lot of other ones, that we start with securing our life necessities first. Jade, back to you.
Okay, so next, we've talked about when the age of when retirement might start, but when do we start saving, right? So in the chat, put, when do you think is a good time to start saving for retirement? At what age should we start saving? Should we start saving when we are a child? Or should we start saving once we become an adult? What is the age that we should start saving money? And what does that look like? So Eva says, as young as possible, can be age 0 if possible, right? There are people that before they are even born, they have, and I apologize if you can hear outside, I think Some neighbors are doing some lawn mowing on a Saturday. But there are people before they are even born, they have their retirement set up from their family. It's called generational wealth, right? And they have a trust fund that's set up for them that they never have to work a day in their life. They will be able to survive off of the wealth that has been passed down from their generations. But for those of us that do not have that established, we have to start saving for the retirement as early as possible. I mean, I think it's good to teach children about being able to invest and put money away to invest in themselves. And I think the first thing that I always talk about when we're teaching this to children is the investment of education, right? So oftentimes we are in the public schools, so that education is not being charged to the parents. Their families receive it for free. They pay the taxes. So it's not per se free, but they are not being charged a tuition to go to that school. And so they start to think, okay, well, I want to go to college after and get a higher education, and that's going to cost money, right? And so putting money in an investment that they can invest towards their own education is kind of that first introduction to what it means to invest. And there are other things that we talk about in terms of stocks and investing in businesses and what that looks like. But I agree with Eva, right? Where there's no age is too young. The earlier that they can understand, the better. Raju says we should learn to save when young, save for retirement as soon as one starts to work. And then Khalees in Zambia says at an age an individual starts having income. Yeah, so as soon as they are receiving money, they should be able to understand what it is that they can do, what are the options that they can do with that money. And investments and saving money for retirement is an option. Raju also says retirement not only about money, but also about non-financial aspects. Yes. So as Raju was already sharing with us the different phases of what retirement looks like, not all is related to money. There are different aspects to what retirement looks like outside of just how much money do you have saved away for retirement. And so what you choose to do with that money, right, depositing it into a savings account, which as most of, I think this is very universal in terms of the interest rates and savings accounts, not going to be enough for you to be able to generate what we call passive income based off of that money that you deposit in, right? The interest rates are so low that you're not losing money. I mean, but it's not very much that you're gaining in terms of contributing to money for your retirement. And so being able to invest that money in what different options you have to invest and what that looks like is some of the things that we introduce. Eva says the babies now are receiving gift monies. The kids are being given birthday monies. All these monies can be saved. Yeah. I remember the very first time that I learned, we used to live next to a Buddhist temple. And because my name is Jade, it's good luck. And so they would always, anytime for my birthday or anything that they were celebrating, I would always get red envelopes full of money. And so that money, it was just our neighbor, but because they knew my name was Jade, it was funny because my sister was like, they never give me anything. But I told her, I said, her name is Diamond. I said, your name does not mean good luck to them. So they're not going to give you, but I will share mine with you. So anyways, yes, money that children get, they can learn at that age of what they can do with that money and how it can be saved and decisions that they can make to make that money grow at that young age. And you'll see here on the screen, Alec has a breakdown of what if you contributed during I'll walk through what this looks like. So at between the age of 35, if you put in $10 a day between the years 35 to 65, that money alone would equal $109,500 US dollars, right? And then, but the value of that money at the end of that period, when you are 65, would not be the same 109,500. It would actually be much higher. The value of that would be $404,234. $404,234. And so over time, the value of money grows, right? And so that growth percentage is a 269% growth, right? The average income at age 65 at a 7.5 interest is only 30,318. So what this shows you is that over time, just putting a little money away can actually grow much greater over time, right? And that is not even just investing, right? That's just putting money away in the value of it. Now on the right, Alex, can you walk through this example? Because I don't think
Okay. No, you did pretty good. I'll continue. So it is, I mean, just like you said, if for 30 years we save $10 a day and it is actually invested. It's not just in a savings account. So it is invested in something. It does have to have investment and gives 7.5% per year growth. Those are the numbers that you share. But for example, here in San Diego, it's extremely difficult for any individual or a couple or family to live on $30,000. Because here in San Diego, minimum rent is for a small, very small studio. It's about $1,000 to, actually, no, sorry, just $1,200. And this is not, it's like the bare minimum. And that's why we have a lot of people that do live on the street. They don't have a home to live in. But then when we look at it, $10 a day, $30 a month, it's manageable. That's why we put it very small. Now, if we take the same $10 a day at 7.5% in growth per year, and do it 10 years earlier, we would only put in an extra 30%. So here we did 100,000, 110. Here we put in 144. But then look at the increase that 10 years earlier will almost double our money in 40 years. So by the time we get to age 65, it will be almost $1 million. And then the income. So this is kind of thinking that at age 65, when we do retire, if we can take money out of the investment account, if we start late, we'll have only 30. But if we start earlier, we will have about 70,000. And 70,000 is pretty good for San Diego. I mean, and San Diego is one of the Southern California is one of, it's not the most expensive place to live in the US, but it is one of the expensive places too. So this is just the numbers based on what, and it shows the importance of, because at age 25, that is when most people are done with college, or just about that time, unless if you're going for a medical degree, which takes usually a few more years. But that is the age that young adults begin to have full-time jobs and to begin working. And it's so easy to just be consumed with everything else that we want to buy. Again, always the latest cell phone, the biggest TV, a newer car, a bigger house. So developing that discipline of putting it into a retirement account is really beneficial at older age. I wish our young group, our young adults were here, which none of them are here today. But this is something that we definitely need to teach them. It's not taught anywhere. It's not taught in high school. It's not taught in college. They come out, our young adults are very excited about saving, not saving, excited about the new job that they have. They want to impress their friends, others. They're looking for a mate. So, and these are some of the things that they do. But really, if we can teach them to, and the basic skills are the same as saving. Retirement is no different than saving. The only difference is that it does get invested. It has to be invested. That we're talking about, that's the main difference between putting money into a savings account, as Jade was saying, and as opposed to putting it into an investment vehicle. It needs to be deposited and then invested over time, and not money taken out, because there are times that we get little entice, little tinkle that, oh, maybe I can borrow from my investment for my retirement account. Oh, this is absolute need. I have to have a new car, so I can go take money out of my account, but developing that discipline is very important. And just to wrap up this one, and then I'll bring it back to you, Jay, for investments. There are information, I'm just gonna put it up here. Let me get rid of my, okay. So in the supplement document, that is, okay, I'll do it later. In the document that's titled supplement, there's a lot of information about US financial products or systems. Those are our credits and so forth. This one. So in here, we go extensively talk about the retirement accounts that are available in US. Some of them may be also available in other places, but a lot of them are here. Today, only Rhonda is here from US, and Rhonda, I'll be working with you. If you have any questions, you should be familiar with a lot of this stuff. If not, we can definitely work. And I'll be working with our youth to make sure that they understand these. So back to our advanced level. As part of the program, when you are working, you will be working with young adults. It's like, I don't know, from probably teenage years. It's good to know your local retirement account, what is available, how do they work. You may need to partner up with a financial advisor that can understand this stuff so they can explain it to you, especially when they begin to work. I think that's good enough for this session, or this part.
Yeah, so I just wanted to emphasize the breakdown of the numbers again, and just the difference between starting at age 25 and starting at age 35. Because when we opened up this conversation and saying, when should we start saving for retirement and what should that look like, right? A lot of people were sharing as soon as possible. And this, you see, just a matter of 10 years, right? The same amount, the difference that it makes, right? And so the earlier starting, the more comfortable your retirement is going to be. And so with that, I think we should probably go into the breakout rooms. Other things that we also talk about during this section is the different investment vehicles, right? So stocks versus bonds, versus mutual funds, and kind of conscious investing, because a lot of times it could be a full-time job figuring out how you're going to invest and what you're going to invest in. And that's why there are financial advisors out there to help you. But I do think that a lot of times people aren't necessarily as conscious about some of the things that they might put their money into. And that's really important when you're choosing a financial advisor, because I ended up switching a financial advisor because they were investing in my money in things that I did not feel I wanted to partake in. Yeah, they were good investments, they were making money, but consciously, I did not want my money going towards certain causes that were happening in the world. And one of those was for-profit prisons. That's something that I definitely didn't want to contribute to. Having a financial advisor that's aligned in what you believe is really important as well, right? It's not just about where the money is going and is it a sound financial decision that's making money. It's also about some things that you might not necessarily be aware of that they could be putting your money in and contributing to. So that's also something to consider when you're thinking through that. So with that, let's go ahead and break up into breakout rooms.
All right, I'll give you guys a full 10 minutes this time. How's that? All right, let's go. All right, so floor is open. Anybody wants to share this? So I have only one question in our sheet. which says, what are some of the things you can invest in now that will benefit you in your retirement years? So anybody who would like to share, go ahead and unmute yourself. You have a small
Alex,
group.
I'd like to share again. Basically, Alex, as far as even I'm a financial planner, but I always believe and advise people when come to retirement, should not focus on money as this. That is only a base. People need to live the 3 phases of life. And in my counseling and my experience, I realized many people suffer basically because loneliness. They don't know who to join, and then their social network. Basically, when they retire, the wealth is there, but they are unable to enjoy the happiness during the retirement. Health is become a very important asset as well during the retirement. So basically, they need to balance. As we learn moderation, they must practice moderation and other aspect of our values during our retirement, even more than during pre-retirement.
Very good. Yeah, those are definitely, you're absolutely right. And I do need to, actually our advanced material needs a lot of updating, and I do need to put that in there. I haven't updated the advanced material mainly because prior to pandemic, we were not using the advanced material. We were hardly ever using it. Most of our programs were done in schools and we were not getting to that. So, but yeah, that's great. Other thoughts? Rhonda, how are you doing with your, I know last week you were asking about when did we start thinking about retirement budget and all of that. How are you feeling about retirement?
I'm feeling excited.
Okay. But do you have a solid plan? I know you're still working. Do you have a year or date when you're going to officially retire?
Yeah, I'm probably, I mean, I'm going to do early, that I do know, probably within the next 3.5 years. So I have a little bit of time left to work.
Okay.
I've got my investments and I'll continue to, to add to those and hope and pray that they grow.
Okay.
But, for me, I'm also thinking ahead of what I want retirement to look like. So that's part of my planning is, what I want it to look like. How am I going to spend my time during those retirement years? I don't want to be one who retires and then says, I don't like this. I want to go back to work. Once I've made the decision, I want to be able to enjoy it.
Yeah. All right. Very cool. So, and let me ask you this: I'm not sure how many children you have. You have only one child. How are they doing? Because they're adults and they have children. Have they planned? Have you been able to help them at least understand? Because a lot of people in the younger generation, they're not so much into this stuff. How are they doing?
That's true. They can be doing a little better, but I've definitely tried. Okay. I actually started exposing my son to investing and financial matters from the time he was a teenager. So yeah, I mean, the information's been there. They're young still, they're paying for college, they're raising children and paying those exorbitant childcare expenses. So, unfortunately, it hasn't moved into that top priority segment yet, but the information's there. The support is definitely there.
Okay, very cool. Me too. How about you? What's happening in India? Unmute yourself, please.
Yes. So, ask me, Alex.
No, go ahead. I mean, that's how is retirement planning happening in India? I know that there's a lot of people and a lot of different probably educations and all of that, but in general.
So I would say generally there is no retirement age, because a larger population, are adults also, they are not aware of saving, so they grow poor and they just stay in poverty very often. So that apart, the ones who are educated also would want to work even after they are retired for money, because they would have probably not learned how to utilize the money that is with them. So when they retire, also retirement is like, okay, I have reached my retirement age. and my company or my, whatever that I work for have asked me to officially retire, but I have, nothing to look forward to. That is quite often. So, yeah, so I will say now with, our kind of generation or just a generation above this, they are, little better because of education, and we have traveled and we have seen the world around and all of that. So now there's a lot of awareness among the other sector. So what I see is with retirement or with work and all of that, it's fragmented. There's no one steady, I would say, pattern.
Matter. And I think in a lot of societies, it's been, I mean, coming from Iran, it's the same thing. Children or parents rely on their children to take care of them when they grow older. And I think outside of the US and maybe European countries, a lot of parents do rely on their children to take care of them. But in US, I don't think if this was ever a case where parents really relied on their children, but now more and more, as Raju was saying, they're becoming isolated. And it's like, especially for those that have only boys, we have two boys. We know that they're already, seriously, they're already ready to put us into retire home. Every time we go out to dinner and it's like 8:30, it's like, okay, old people, let's get you into your bed, into your PJs before it gets too late. So that they make fun of it, but I think it's going to happen soon. Tay, curious, you guys from Rwanda, Zambia, Ethiopia, would you guys like to share anything? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, in Ethiopia, I mean, so for employees, usually the retirement age is from 60 to 65, but it changed. The law changed between these years from time to time. Yeah, but the majority of the people, they are not employed. Rather, they work in this subsistence farming. So that means there is no like retirement age per se. So they work in an extended family. Yeah, but with regard to this employees like in the cities, one thing that I have noticed is when you retire, like there is a feeling that you are not going to contribute to the society anymore. So usually you see people, I mean, they feel they have grown old and they're not useful to the society. So that really, I think, is like I have seen also with some of my relatives, and that has become a little bit problematic, I think, because in other areas or in rural areas, they're always useful, whether, I mean, even if they are older, so they participate in taking care of kids, and they become also, they serve as negotiators of, especially the men. I mean, the women, when they get old, of course, it is a different thing because of the gender roles. But for the men, they get more respect when they grow older. So they contribute a lot for the community in that sense. But in the cities with the employment, I think it is the reverse. And they are not also required mostly by the community even to contribute. They're just, it's just said that they have stopped working, so they're not useful anymore.
Very interesting. And that's something that we will touch upon next week on the last session, is like the importance of everyone being involved into the progress of our societies. So before we wrap up, Achilles, anything from you on this topic? If you'd like to add anything, we've got a minute left. Don't want to leave you up. Go ahead.
Well, Alex, basically like in Zambia, the retirement age is basically between 60 and 65. And some years back, what used to happen was that most of the people, when they are approaching their retirement age, they were just preparing to go to the village. Okay. But nowadays, they've come to learn of the importance of investing in other things, such as real estate, and also going into agriculture. So this is what they have now started doing. So this is the situation in Zambia anyway.
Okay, all right, very cool. So I'm gonna close the breakout. Close it. Yeah, it's really something that the retirement, and as I said, people are starting to call it something different, not necessarily retirement, the next stage or whatever, but it's part of, as you can see, it's part of our whole plan. It's going to come for us. We need to prepare for it, both financially, mentally, emotionally, to make sure that we are happy, we are healthy. And since we are living longer and longer, it's going to even go further. So we need to prepare even more for it as soon as we can. All right, very good. So let's go back to the main hall. See you guys there. Okay, everybody's back. Jay, would you like to share?
Yeah, so the first question that we went into were, what are some things you can invest in now that will benefit you in your retirement years? And I think it was definitely pretty universal that everyone agreed that real estate is something that you can invest in no matter what time frame you are in life, where you are, that is going to appreciate over time. Even there is what we call a real estate cycle in terms of periods of time where you might have depreciation of different property values due to inflation in the economy. However, over time, long periods of time, the market recovers from that, and over time it will continue to appreciate. You look at property values years ago, and regardless of the real estate cycle, and where you might have different bubbles that burst that causes short period depreciation, those property values have increased long term. And then the second vehicle that we talked about were the volatility of stocks. We also talked about mutual funds and how there's just so much in terms of different options that you have within mutual funds that you can invest in. We even talked about real estate mutual funds, where you can, instead of investing in a property individually, you can invest in a mutual fund that then turns around and invests in a real estate project. And so you have those options that exist. And I mean, there's mutual funds for every different type of cause that you can think of. And so really thinking through what your interests are and having your investment decisions align with your interests, being really kind of foundational in terms of what you should think through prior to working with someone who works full time in the space, like a financial advisor, to be able to assist you, because it really is, it takes a lot of time. I mean, there's so much out there. There's so many different options out there. The other question that we talked about is what might be some short-term, or first we asked, is it possible to have short-term investments? What do they look like? What are some options? Or are all investments long-term? And we said, while most investments should be looked at from a long-term perspective in terms of the return that you're going to get to maximize the return, there are short-term investment options that are less risky for people. And we talked about the concept of a certificate deposit and what that looks like here in the US, and whether or not that is something that is a vehicle that exists in other communities around the world.
Okay. All right, very cool. So our group mostly concentrated on the importance of retirement and planning, and how it's kind of what's the general perception in different countries. And so Roger shared that we definitely need to think about not only in the material sense of retirement to make sure we have enough money, but we also need to make sure that we have happiness. We are healthy and we are happy, and those are the things. And it's a story I like to share. My father, he was a doctor. He had his own practice, and we had to encourage him. And this was that practicing medicine was the only thing he ever did. I'm not kidding. You would give him a hammer, he would say what to do with this. but he was passionate about it. And I always remember that he says 50% of the patient's cure is in his hand, the other 50% in his God's hands. He would always pray for the patient. But when we encouraged him, because he was starting to have Alzheimer's, and we encouraged him to retire because we didn't want to have any issue with giving wrong medicine, he said, so what am I going to do when I don't practice? It's like, well, Dad, you can go hang around with your friends, walks and things. It's like, oh, maybe I should go find some friends. It's like, Dad, I think you should have had some friends. He did have friends. I think he was just joking, but that goes back to what Raju was saying. We're going to make sure that we are surrounded by friends. And I think now, because we have become the global village, there's a lot more friends that are not the friends that are on Facebook. Those are not friends. Those are just connections. The friends are the ones that we communicate, at least on WhatsApp or call or text or something. Mitsu from India said that retirement is the general idea of saving up for retirement in India is low. That's something that people don't think about. And what I shared was that I think it's cultural. In a lot of cultures, retirement has not, especially money part of it, has not been a big deal, because parents, as they get to retirement, they rely on their children, that they will take care of them. But we know that that is not necessarily not as true in US or maybe some parts of Europe, but it's something that we need to kind of plan for it. Tay from Ethiopia mentioned that people sometimes feel useless. They don't feel like once they get to retire, especially people, I think the ones that are outside of the rural cities, like farmers and things, once they retire, it's like, oh, what do I do? I've been farming all my life, so I don't have anything to contribute to the society. And then same kind of thing in Zambia. So those were the things that we talked about in our group. It's again, I think it is so important to bring this. It seems like it's been a taboo thing, especially now in our societies at a global level, that we need to encourage. Oh, and I asked Rhonda, she's thinking of retiring in about 3 or 4 years. She feels good about being set up, and I asked if her son has taken the steps. Jordan's father, I believe it's Jordan's father, if I'm not mistaken. Have they planned? And she said, well, she has tried to help him from teenage years, but she would definitely wish that he would take it more seriously. Maybe Rhonda, next time we do this series, and it's a good time, your son and your daughter-in-law can attend the program. I think that will definitely benefit them. All right, we got 10 minutes left. Jade, what do we have for the last 10 minutes?
Well, I think we may want to go into what the assignments are.
Okay, all right, okay, sounds good. So I'm gonna pull up the advanced level. There is a full section where we talked about it a little bit. So investing under the advanced level is under courage, because as we talked about putting money into a saving. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. I apologize. I'm looking at it, you guys are not. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think the evaluating the investment, I think is going to be really helpful for people to go through when they're thinking about, is this something that I should be investing in? Those questions, Alex.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and we put it under courage because it definitely investing in anything, in our family, in our relationship, in our children, in our society, in our communities, is something that we don't know if it's going to come out right or not. It's just like when we start a business from scratch, an entrepreneur, they don't know that things are going to work out right, but we put our 200% into it, again, into all different aspects of life. We're taking a risk. We are hoping that there's potential for high returns in the long term. And you can see it definitely in our children, grandchildren, our marriages, everything in there. So all this different, it's guaranteed that when we invest, there's going to be challenges. No investment is without challenges. There's going to be no pain, no gain. If you don't go through some hardship with investments, that's why there is, in marriages, there's arguments, there's makeup, with kids, it's the same process. We go through all that, and these are all part of it. We do have initial investments. So for example, when we go to college, we spend a lot of time, we invest a lot of time. Here in US, a lot of time and money. And I know in other parts of the world, education is free, but here is not. Some colleges are free, but not full-blown university degrees. We do need to diversify. I'm sure Raju can attest to all of these points, that we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. Real estate is not the only solution. Stocks are not the only solution. Having intellectual properties such as songs, music, poems, books, anything that we create are not the only one. We need to have a little bit of everything. And it's very easy that we may get focused on one, because for a period of time, as Jade was mentioning, maybe period of time, real estate is doing really well. Then another time, stocks are doing really well. So it's good to have a lot of different investments in our portfolio. This one is a big one, independent investigation of truth. And it's big because often we rely on the recommendations of friends, family, coworkers, neighbors. They say, oh, I did this, I made so much money, or I did so well. You should do the same thing. And while we should take their recommendation, but it's ultimately up to us to evaluate that investment. And again, it's not just about money in anything. To investigate, to do some research, to make sure that this investment is right for me. What an investment might have been right for someone else. Not that there's anything wrong with that investment, or the friend is trying to give us bad advice, but it may not be the right one for me. I think one thing I need to add in here is the, Jade, you mentioned it's socially conscious investment. I think you said one of the investments was in a for-profit prison. So if that is something that I don't know, I don't like it, then I should not get into it, even though it might have a high return. I mean, just a high return and should not be the determining factor in there. Another thing that I have seen, particularly with those who start a business or an entrepreneur, they start something from scratch, is that they forget about their life necessities and pour everything into, let's say, the business. They sometimes even cash out all of their retirement accounts, thinking that, oh, this is a great idea that I have, I need to get in there and put this in. Well, our life necessities never stop. You still have to eat, have a place to live in, our health needs some money. And my general rule, I've been involved with several for-profit startup companies. I've always thought that 5 years, that it's not a magic number, 5 to 7 years. It's like, we have to make sure that the money that goes into the business is there, and the money for me and my family is there to support myself for 5 to 7. Now, if within the first year the business is successful and I start earning some money from it, icing on the cake. If not, I have planned for it. So many businesses fail because they don't think about their personal life necessities, personal life and family. All right, I guess I did have the ethical investing in there. And investments is all about patience. No investment. And this is something I think our young people are not recognizing, especially when they get into the investments in a good cycle. I can make an example right now. I think right now it's the cycle of cryptocurrency. Anybody from anywhere has come up with their own cryptocurrency. It started with Bitcoin, but then there are so many of them right now. I don't know how many are out there. And young ones, so when we were growing up, buying stocks, you have to have enough money to buy one whole or two or three or whatever. You could not go buy a half a stock of Amazon or Apple. But these days, because of the new products that are available, our youth are getting into investing even with little money, which is great. This is a new tool that they have. It's great to have. But then they also need to learn that just because right now the cryptocurrencies are doing really well, they may not do well in a year or so. So they need to be ready to lose it all. I think if we have it in here, that if we don't have the stomach to lose the initial investments, we should not be investing. It's the same thing as I think a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about lending money to friends and family. If we can't think of that money as being gone, don't lend it to friends and family. Investments is the same thing. If we can afford to lose that initial investment, definitely don't get in it. Investment vehicles, it could be a lot in different parts of the world. Education, you all understand that. Stocks and bonds, I think that's kind of universal. There are information as what's the difference between bonds and stocks. Mutual funds, Dave was talking about it, the benefits. Then we get into investments in our family and children, into our community, into our business, and then real estate. So these are all the different vehicles that are available. I'm going to go to your worksheets, to our worksheets. There is a sheet in here for those who want to. If you haven't done it, it's kind of fun. This is just one way you can begin to keep track of stocks. And this is something that we do it from time to time, especially for like in schools. We do it from grade 5 and up. The way we do it, it's like, this is how it works. If I have an iPhone, and we start with things that we're already using. Who's the manufacturer? Apple. We can look up the stock symbol. This is one site that we can look up stock symbols, finance@yahoo.com. I think it's is it APP or APL? I can't remember. It's one of these. APPL, thank you. My wife just gave me a pointer from the background. So we can look up the stock, how much it was. I'm just actually going to do it. It's fairly quick. And youth and children, they love doing this exercise. So I can look up the stock for the price. I can look at the 5-year. So 5 years ago, it was, let's say, $28. I would put 28. This week is 160. I think that's what it was. So you can see this helps the young ones or anybody to begin tracking stocks, because getting into stocks is a lot about tracking, understanding the risks and rewards. It's not always rewards, but it's always risks too. So this is something, and there are apps that this can be done on apps above. Yahoo Finance has actually, anybody can create an account and pretend that you are buying and selling stocks in there. It will keep track of it for you. All right, so assignments for next week before we run out of time. So this could be one, the courage under, you can do this one. Let's see, we did generosity. If you haven't done generosity, please complete generosity. There is one lesson that we don't do on the virtual series because it's you have to do it. It's actually, if you remember, in the moderation lesson, we created a shopping list. So we created this shopping list in here in moderation. In classrooms, now we take this shopping list because by now, the participants should have about $80, $70, $80 in their treasure box. So by now, in their spend, usually they have put in at least $10 per week. So they have about $80 in here. And now we go shopping. And the way we do our grocery shopping is, let's see, it's in the truthful lesson where we talk about how we get deceived, either online shopping or when we go to supermarkets or other stores. How do we get deceived by ads? So we need to be able to identify that. And this flip is something that is used in US and Canada. It's a way of looking up prices from different stores. We used to get them paper mail, but now we get them, we can do them online. And then the last activity that we have, remember next week, hopefully we'll have some talents to show off. If you haven't done it, please record your talent if you can. It can be pictures, it can be poems that you recite, you've written. It could be somebody last series did hairstyles that he or she does. So it can be a lot of different stuff. Listing out your talents, what our talents will concentrate on, how our talents can benefit our society and humanity. And then we get into how do we use our talents and passion to drive business ideas. So those are the assignments for next week. I'm going to start sharing, open it up. Jade, any last minute comments, or anyone has any questions before we end today's session?
No, that's it for me. It was a pleasure to be with you all today and to talk about investing and retirement and selflessness and generosity. I hope you were able to take something from today's lesson.
Yeah, and if you need professional advice, I'm sure Roger would be more than happy to help those that need professional advice in Malaysia and the countries around that area. I think that works, but he has a lot of experience. Okay, all right, very good. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, especially for friends from India and Malaysia. I know it's very late in the morning and late night. Have a great evening, day, whatever you have, and we'll see you guys next week.